At her daughter's wedding, my stepmother mocked me. Called me a loser, just because I care about my business and money. But guess what? That same money paid for the wedding catering, which is now being enjoyed by people without homes. Yeah, there's been a lot of drama in my family. All because of something I did at my stepsister's wedding. And sure, maybe I'm supposed to feel bad about it. But I don't. In fact, I feel really good about the choice I made. Because I know those people appreciated my gift. Far more than the guests ever would have. And honestly, I don't mind upsetting my stepmother or my stepsister. The only thing that actually bothers me is that my dad isn't talking to me anymore. My stepmother, Sally, and her daughter, Nancy, have been in my life since I was 17. I'm 31 now. And they're still just as unpleasant as they were back then. They never tried to get to know me. They made it clear, crystal clear, that to them, Dad, Sally, and Nancy were a family. And I was just the outsider. My parents divorced when I was 8. My dad and I had a pretty normal relationship. Until he started dating Sally. After that, I didn't want to visit anymore. Because Sally and Nancy were always there. Making me feel unwelcome. Even without saying a single cruel word. It was how they acted. Cold, dismissive, like I didn't exist. They wouldn't talk to me unless my dad was in the room. Sometimes they'd whisper in front of me. Just to make me feel small. So I pulled away. Spent more time with my mom. And eventually, I moved away at 24 for work. I came back 3 years ago. To start my business and be with my mom. Who had just been diagnosed with cancer. Her illness brought my dad and me closer again. Their divorce had been mutual and respectful. So they still cared for each other. After the diagnosis, Dad visited her like an old friend. We started having family dinners on Saturdays. Just like old times. I loved that. But it didn't last. She passed away earlier this year. The cancer was caught too late. We all knew it was coming. So we mourned, but also felt relief. She wasn't suffering anymore. I thought things with my dad would fall apart again. But this time, he held on. Every Saturday, we had dinner, just the two of us. He never pushed me to see Sally or Nancy. He knew I didn't like them. And now that I had my own house, the one Mom left me, he could come to me. Without dragging them into it. And he barely mentioned them. Unless he absolutely had to. But a few months ago, after Nancy got engaged, he brought up something over dinner. Money problems. Even though things were tight, Sally and Nancy made zero effort to cut back. They acted like everything was fine. Meanwhile, my dad had just started saving again. His business was finally recovering. But Nancy wanted a huge, expensive wedding. 200 guests. And both she and Sally expected my dad to pay for it. I wasn't surprised. He's not even Nancy's biological father. But he's been footing the bill for everything. Since he got with Sally. Nancy's real dad? Nowhere in the picture. Never has been. Still, I thought it was unfair to dump all of this on my dad. Especially while he was still recovering. From a financial hit during the pandemic. Anyway, he asked me for help. Not for Sally. Not for Nancy. For him. And that changed how I saw it. I took time to think it over. And eventually, I agreed. He was my dad. I trusted him completely. And to be honest, I make good money in my business. I don't have a family of my own. No plans to start one anytime soon. I'm single, and I've got more money than I need. So I said yes. I got an invitation to the wedding. But I wasn't planning to attend. Until Dad convinced me. He knew it would be awkward. I don't get along with them, and they don't get along with me. Over the years, I've had very few run-ins with them. And every single one has turned into a competition about who's more successful in life, Nancy or me. Spoiler alert, I don't care. Eventually, the day came. Dad arranged for me to meet the caterer and decorator. I wrote them a direct check, since he was busy with other things. That meant my name was on the contract. That would matter, later. Because on the wedding day, I made sure that all the food went to people without homes. None of the 200 guests Nancy invited got a single bite. And let me be clear. I did this purely out of spite and hatred. And I don't feel bad. Not even a little. Because I had my reasons. Here's what happened. As I said, I stayed away from Sally and Nancy. But obviously, at the wedding, there was no avoiding them. Nancy was busy, she was the bride. But at the reception, Sally was hovering around. At one point, she came over while I was standing with a couple of my cousins. She joined us and started chatting politely, like we were any other guests. I said nothing. But eventually, she started talking directly to me. I responded politely, barely. But then the conversation took a nasty turn. She brought up my love life. Asked if I was still single. When I said yes, she started making little sounds of disapproval. Told me that I was already in my 30s. And should really start looking for a man. Said that the older I got, the less desirable I'd become. That I needed to settle down and have a family before it was too late. She pretended it was concern. But I knew better. It was all an act. She was mocking me. It was humiliating. Still, I stayed quiet. I didn't want to cause a scene. I was doing everything I could to keep it together. But then she crossed the line. She said I was turning into my mother. That just like her, I cared only about money and work. That I was obsessed with growing my business. But ignored my personal life. Ignored what a woman my age should be doing. Getting married and having babies. According to her, that was the only way a woman could be happy. Basically, she wanted me to become her. And not only did she compare me to her daughter, she dragged my mom into it too. Now, I don't care what Sally thinks of me. But dragging my mom into it? No. That's where I draw the line. She was always insecure about my mom. Because my mom was wildly successful. And yes, she was a bit of a workaholic. So am I. And we loved it. But that had nothing to do with why I'm single right now. Sally never got that. Eventually, even though I was still trying not to engage, Sally told me I should find a man as soon as possible. Or I'd end up like my mom. Dying alone. Relying on her ex-husband for companionship. And then she laughed. Like it was the funniest joke in the world. It was one of the most disgusting things I've ever heard someone say. Even my cousin stood there, speechless. And after dropping that bombshell, she just walked away. Like nothing had happened. I stood there for a moment. And then I knew. She needed to be humbled. So I acted. I didn't think twice. I went to the women's restroom. And called the woman in charge of the catering. I told her, calmly, firmly, that there was a change of plans. All the food was to be delivered to the local homeless shelter instead. And since my name was on the contract, and I was the one who wrote the check, it wasn't hard to get it done. The woman was confused at first. But once I made it clear that the decision was mine, she said she could have the banquet staff load everything into the trucks and deliver it to the nearest shelter. And honestly, as long as she got paid, she didn't care. By the end of the day, she didn't care what happened to the food. And honestly, I think that's how it should be. She was professional. And that's all I could have asked for. Thankfully, under my direction and instructions, The catering staff loaded everything into the trucks quickly and drove away. There wasn't a single bite left behind for the wedding guests. Not even one canopy. And that was exactly what I wanted. As the trucks left, I got into my own car and started driving too. Because after what had happened, there was no way I was going to stick around to witness the fallout. I followed the trucks to the nearest shelter, which was almost an hour away. And during that drive, my phone started blowing up with calls and messages from my dad, demanding an explanation. See, the wedding lunch was supposed to be served in a separate hall. So neither my dad nor Sally noticed the staff leaving. And when I slipped out, there were still 30 minutes to go before lunch was scheduled to begin. So my dad had no idea anything was wrong. No reason to be suspicious. But eventually, when he walked into the lunch hall, he found it completely empty. No food. No staff. Just bare tables and chairs. He called me immediately, desperate to know what the hell had happened. I didn't answer for a while. And when I finally did, 3 hours later, he was furious. The moment I picked up, he started yelling. So I waited for him to calm down before I said anything. And when I finally spoke, I told him the truth. That I didn't regret what I'd done. Not one bit. I told him this was exactly what Sally and Nancy deserved. And that I refused to feel guilty for it. But he didn't care. He said it didn't matter whether they deserved it or not. Because he didn't. He told me that it wasn't Sally or Nancy who had to face the embarrassment that day. It was him. He was the one left humiliated in front of everyone. Apparently, he had to contact the hotel authorities to try and fix the situation. But even they couldn't come up with food for 200 guests on such short notice. So he, Sally, Nancy, the groom, the groomsmen, and the bridesmaids had to scramble to place orders from nearby restaurants. Because obviously, they couldn't let 200 guests go home on an empty stomach. And with no official explanation. There were plenty of whispers. It was completely humiliating for my dad to have to serve some slapped-together, disorganized lunch instead of the luxury buffet everyone had been promised. He sounded furious. And honestly, I felt bad for him. But I told him, regardless of what he had to deal with, I wasn't going to apologize. I explained what Sally had said to me. And told him he should have been just as angry about what she said about his ex-wife, my mom. So if he was expecting some kind of apology from me, he could forget it. What Sally said wasn't okay. I can tolerate being insulted, even mocked. But dragging my mom into it? Absolutely not. That's where I draw the line. And this, what I did, was exactly what she deserved. But then my dad said something that really hurt. He said my actions brought him nothing but shame and humiliation. He told me I had two choices. Either apologize publicly to everyone involved, or he'd cut me off completely. He said what I did was wrong. But what about what she did? He also told me that, because of what happened, he had no choice but to tell Sally and Nancy, who had actually paid for everything. Apparently, Sally was about to call the catering manager and demand answers. But before she could, he had to explain to them that I was probably behind it. Especially since I had vanished, too. And here's the kicker. Even after all that, Sally never once admitted what she'd said to me. Not even a hint. That may be what she said triggered my reaction. Nothing. So now my dad thinks I should make a public apology. Maybe even post a statement online, so everyone can see it. And I'm just not doing that. At least not the kind of statement he expects. If I do post something, it'll look more like this. Because if anyone needs to own up to their mistakes, it's Sally. Whether I paid for that wedding or not. What she said was unacceptable. And what I did was show her that treating people like trash has consequences. Even if I hadn't spent a single cent, she still wouldn't have had the right to say what she did. And I stand by that. So right now, my dad and I are at odds. We're not talking. And honestly, I don't know what to do. He's my only living parent. And I don't want to lose him. But I also can't bring myself to apologize. I've put up with so much garbage from Sally and Nancy over the years. But what happened that day crossed a line. And I refuse to apologize for standing up for myself. I understand my dad. I really do. I know he wasn't directly to blame. But in all of this mess, he hasn't once considered that maybe, just maybe, Nancy's behavior wasn't okay either. And now here we are, not speaking to each other, with no idea which one of us will give in first. I've read the comments, and it seems like a lot of people feel the same way I do. That Sally desperately needed a reality check. Over the years, I've watched her treat other people terribly. Not just me. The difference is, those people never had a way to get back at her. Unless maybe some waitress once tampered with her meal at a restaurant. Then, just a few days ago, he messaged me from a different number. This time, he wrote that he was extremely disappointed in how things had turned out. That he had expected better from me. That he had truly hoped I would acknowledge my mistake and apologize for it. But instead, 2 whole months had gone by. And I hadn't even tried. That I had just let time pass without making any effort to fix our relationship. And that this clearly showed how little I cared. He also complained that I had blocked him. And now, he wanted me to know my chance to apologize and fix things had passed. From now on, he wanted nothing to do with me. Honestly, I didn't know what to say to that. It was basically him telling me he never wanted to speak to me again. What are you even supposed to say to something like that? Especially when it comes from your father. Someone with whom you've always had such a complicated relationship. I won't lie. It hurt. Of course it did. But again, what was I supposed to say? I keep coming back to the same thing. I'm his daughter. And yet, all these years, I've been the one expected to repair everything. I don't know why. I have no idea why. The responsibility always falls on me. Why it's always me. Who has to make the effort to fix things? Especially in this situation, where I don't even believe I did anything that bad. Honestly, I feel like a complete fool for ever thinking that maybe, just maybe, my dad and I could have a normal relationship. I should have given up on that idea the moment I realized his priority was his new family, not me. I was never one of those kids who took their parents' divorce badly. Because, to me, they never seemed heartbroken over it. So I figured, maybe it wasn't that tragic. I accepted it. I learned to live with each of them separately. I had different lives with both of them. But what I never learned was how to accept that after my dad got remarried, I would no longer be a priority in his life. I never thought that would happen. I believed that despite my differences with Nancy and Sally, my dad and I would still be a family. But I've learned my lesson. I'm never going back. Blossom Update 5. Hi again. It's been a year since my last update. My business is doing great, thank God. and of course, thanks to all the hard work I put into it. I'm still living in my mom's house. The only change is that recently, my boyfriend moved in with me. We've been dating for 5 months. Some people might think that's too soon. But honestly, we feel like it's the right time. My father and I still don't speak. And from what I've heard, he and Sally sold our old house and moved into an apartment to be closer to Nancy and her husband. I felt a bit sad when I found out, because I grew up in that house. And my dad sold it without even telling me. But then again, I probably shouldn't have expected much. Anyway, I'm happy with my life. And that's what really matters now. Brick Update 6. In terms of my personal and professional life, things are going well. Ups and downs, like anyone else. But nothing major. My business is thriving. And my relationship with my boyfriend has been going great too. Since moving in together around 3 years ago, everything has felt natural. Things just work. But my dad? That's another story. About 6 months ago, I heard from some people that he was getting divorced. A messy, complicated divorce. I don't know exactly what happened. We still don't talk. But what I do know is that my stepmother Sally was demanding half of everything, including the apartment, plus spousal support, since she hasn't worked for most of their marriage. So my dad ended up giving her practically the entire apartment. He came out of the divorce on the losing end of things. And look, that's not my problem. It's not my divorce. It's not my family. But my father made it my problem. When he contacted me a couple months ago, he wanted to move in to my mother's house with me. He figured that since he'd been present in my mom's final days, and they had a good relationship, he could use the house until he found somewhere else to live. But I didn't reply. That house was left to me in my name. And it's not my responsibility that the people he chose to defend ended up treating him like trash. And honestly, his message didn't even sound like an attempt to reconnect. It sounded like a demand. That's the only contact I've had with my dad in years. And it's exactly in line with how things have been lately.